Love, love, until I feel the breath of the Spirit flowing in me.
Hello, welcome to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Frances Beaumont. She's the Labour DLP candidate for Western Victoria. Welcome,
Thank
Frances.
you, Geraldine.
It's great to have you back at our show.
Thanks.
And would you, for those who don't know you, would you tell a bit about your background, your family, and your marriage, and your profession?
Okay. I grew up in a politically aware family, in a typical Catholic family. I'm married. I've got a wonderful husband who doesn't share my faith, but he's a good man and I love him dearly. We have a daughter who's 22, and I've been a nurse for 30 years.
Wow.
I've also done some work in research governance, and I serve on a couple of human research ethics committees. I'm currently working as a nurse in community health, so I'm in community nursing, so visiting people in their home. It's a community nursing and hospital in the home program, so it's a beautiful job to go and see people in their own home and deliver their care.
Yes, and doing community nursing, you're very much in touch with people and come into people's houses on their terms, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, which makes prepares you to be a good politician.
Yeah, I've always been very interested in people, and human dignity is one of my core values. So I think that unless you put human dignity as your central belief in how people should be treated, I think you're going to go wrong somewhere.
And I know that one of your party's values are pro-life.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And has things in nursing led you to believe in that pro-life? Like things that happen, like, because you're not pro-euthanasia, are you? You're pro-life.
No, I'm not pro-euthanasia. We actively ran a program, a media campaign, and when the euthanasia legislation was up for the final debates, and that campaign was called Defining Our Dying, because we want the community to think about what this legislation can mean, and for the MPs to think about it. My view is that the vulnerable pay the price when we introduce legislation like this, that there is a risk of coercion, that there is a risk that people will feel obliged, if they see themselves as a burden, to be euthanized rather than accept the care that the community should be providing for them. I think end of life care is a tremendous privilege, not only for professional carers such as nurses and doctors, but also that the family has a time to walk that journey with their loved one. And the most incredible conversations can be had by family members in that time through the dying process. And that it is really sad for our society if we see death as something that needs to be totally controlled and medicalised rather than being a natural process. One of my mum's sayings used to be, from the moment we're born, we're all heading towards death. And it's a journey that we have to take, and we don't know when it'll come, but we need to be prepared for it.
Yes, I think a lot of people who are pro-euthanasia imagine that pro-lifers are wanting to keep people in pain, or wanting to keep people on machines in a very kind of cruel way. What do you say?
That's not the case. We have the capacity to provide excellent palliative care and to give people a good death, but a natural death. We have the capacity to control symptoms that are distressing, and interestingly enough, it's not actually pain that most people towards the end worry about. It's feeling a burden. And so we're sending a very seriously wrong message to people if we say, if it gets too bad, we're going to kill you. That's not a good message to send to people. And it also is problematic for anyone with a disability, because it puts a message out there that there are some lives worth living and there are some lives that aren't worth living. So if you require a high level of care, your life is not worth living, and therefore you should do the honourable thing and accept euthanasia. Now, to me, that is not a caring society.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose when I was a nurse, I remember, people more concerned about them seeing their parents suffer than actually whether the parent was suffering.
Yeah.
They were like, oh, I can't bear to see, and they were saying, oh, when someone's sick, you should put them down like a dog. And I said to them, actually, because I was working in a dementia unit, I said, your actually mother I see her quite happy when we have dance classes and when we do drama, or we do crafts and everything. And so it was, for them, it seemed to be more about how they felt, the suffering they were going through, but not to put the family down, because it's very traumatic when your relative is seeing your relative so different to chatting and all those sort of things. But it is a challenge, dementia.
It is a challenge, but also it's hard for us to imagine how we would respond in a given situation until we're in that situation. Something that would seem intolerable when you're imagining it in the future may be perfectly tolerable when you get to that point. Some people might say, oh, I would just put me out of it if I lose my marbles.
Well, yeah, on that note, we need to go for a break, but very interesting. You've been watching Spirit of Life. Stay with us, and we'll be back after the break.
Blow till I hear much breath of the Spirit flowing in me. Blow, blow till I hear much breath of the Spirit flowing in me.
Hello, welcome back to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Frances Beaumont. She's the Labour DLP candidate for Western Victoria. Welcome back.
Thank you.
You were talking about euthanasia, because your Labour Party, DLP Labour Party, is pro-life.
Yes, we are pro-life, and euthanasia is a big issue where, I was saying before that people think they might not be able to handle something that is in the future, and that they may not be able to handle a particular symptom. You hear statements made by people such as, just take me out and shoot me if I lose my marbles. But they can't imagine the situation of having that particular symptom until they're there. And it's surprising to people who've imagined that they'd want to be killed that they actually are able to handle what life throws at them. And most people will want to fight for life.
Oh yeah, I agree. And my own experience with my dad having cancer was, his death was beautiful in a sense of he had it at home, and he chose, not to keep getting up with the painkillers, and also chemo, and he said he had much time to reconcile with friends, with family, and have beautiful talks. He talked to us about his that he not to worry. He's with God. He's going to God, and
Yeah.
and it was a beautiful and you know, and we shared, you know, things that we weren't happy and things that we were happy with, and everything he said to us, you know, if I've hurt you, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And vice versa. We said all our, you know, and that was such a beautiful experience.
Yeah, it's that journey of having that time to reflect and having that time to make peace,
Yes.
and having that time to walk beside someone is so important. And I think this legislation in so many ways takes that away from people because they feel there's a responsibility to approach death in the most efficient possible way and
Yes.
to not see it as a time. And I think there's also a misconception that people have that if you withdraw treatment, it's euthanasia. It most definitely is not euthanasia. Withdrawal of futile treatment is a natural death. You are not obliged
That's
in
right.
any shape or form to accept treatment that is burdensome. A natural death still occurs when you, for example, stop having chemotherapy that is not going to be giving you benefit.
Yes, yes, and yeah,
And I think there's a real lack of compassion if it's pushed to people that they should be accepting every single treatment available. It's got to be an individualised choice.
yes,
But I also think that it is doing people a great disservice if you erroneously describe withdrawing treatment as so-called passive euthanasia. It's
Yeah.
not. It's
Yeah.
just letting nature take its course.
yes, and what about the issue of pain as such? To people saying that they don't want it's. Would you say that people wanting to do voluntary euthanasia as the fear, they want to have control, like, so they just want to plan when to die and those sort of things?
It's interesting. I did a qualitative analysis of all the submissions that were sent to the inquiry into end-of-life choices, the parliamentary inquiry, and they released their report before the legislation was debated. And there was two extremes of views of people who took the time to write to that inquiry. There was the people who wanted total control over everything and that being in control was really, really important. And there was the other end of the spectrum where people were talking about the benefit of of not having this legislation to the whole of society. And if you see that society as a whole matters more than an individual, this legislation is really dangerous because individuals who are vulnerable may be feeling an obligation to accept something that they wouldn't. The law does have an educative role. It
Yes.
does, what is legal in society does impact what people think is acceptable. And so this legislation is concerning because people who are disabled, people who are vulnerable economically, any number of people who may not have made this choice if they had total freedom to have good care, may feel coerced into accepting this treatment. And people are not making an informed choice until we genuinely offer great palliative care to everyone, including in the regions far away from the metropolitan centres.
And what's your view on family, especially with the DLP? And
The DLP asks three questions when we look at policy and look at any legislation that we should support. We ask, is it good for families? Is it good for community? And is it good for workers? So they're the three areas that we see should be central to our community and the way we govern our community.
yes,
So family is very important. It's the basic unit of society that we should be building on. And we should be building from the bottom up rather than imposing down on families. Parents should be the first educators of their children.
Yeah, and I suppose there's many areas, but before we go into those other areas, we probably need to go for a break. You've been watching Spirit of Life. We'll be back after the break. Hello, welcome back to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Frances Beaumont. She's the Labour DLP candidate for Western Victoria. Welcome back, Frances.
Thank you.
We were talking a bit about family. What do you think about the Safe Schools' impact on the family?
I think the Safe Schools program is problematic. It's the state imposing an ideology on families that may be contrary to what the parents want their children to be taught. So I think the parents should be the first educators of their children. They should be able to choose what their children are taught in an area like this. And the Safe Schools program is not what it's purported to be, merely an anti-bullying program. It is driving a cultural Marxist ideology into our homes by teaching it to our children. And the fact that children are exposed to this at such a young age is really problematic. Parents should be the primary educators of children in these areas.
Yeah, the gender fluidity can be quite a challenge. I know that in some schools they're having lots of role plays about different genders, different ages. I know with one school they had to do a role play for being transgender or being gay, being all the different things. And I think there's some research about the gender fluidity where a lot more people are going for counselling and wanting the change. I think in the past it was quite a small number, but it's quite big now. That
the numbers are growing, and of people who are wanting to have change their gender surgically. But there is evidence out there to show that the age at which people are changing their gender is problematic, because if you start mucking around with puberty blockers and artificial hormones and surgically altering young people, you're making a patient for life rather than someone who, in a high proportion of cases, these young people will return to perceiving themselves at their natal sex without any intervention. People need counselling if they are experiencing gender dysphoria, and it's the one example where we say as a society to people, we'll reinforce your delusion. We don't say to someone who's suffering from a mental health condition called anorexia that, okay, love, you're really the size of a house, even though you are severely underweight and thinking that you shouldn't be eating. We don't reinforce that and encourage the person to self-harm by not eating. But in the case of gender dysphoria, we say to someone that, okay, well, you might be the wrong sex in the wrong body. And we're going to go and reinforce that belief by maybe giving you hormones, maybe surgically altering you. But it's great for the big pharmaceutical companies who make those hormones, because you've now got someone who needs to be on them for life. So it is a real concern that rather than just taking a breath and giving the young person time to be and work through the issues that may have precipitated this, and give them counselling to let them work through why they think that they are the opposite sex to the sex which they're born.
Yeah, I heard that from some research that young people have more depression today, and also they have so many options that it causes them confusion. And also when people put things into their mind, they can actually start to, explore many identities, and it can create more stress and worry for some young people.
I think we have to get back to a point where young people know they're valued for who they are, that they don't have to fit the image of the perfect Facebook postable picture, that they are loved for who they are.
Not the amount of likes on Facebook.
Not the amount of likes on Facebook, yes, precisely. Not the amount of followers that they have, that maybe someone that they don't know as a personal friend. So I think in some ways it's a lot harder for digital natives who've always grown up with that digital world at their fingertips. Someone as old as me remembers the pre-internet.
Yes. Well, I know I use Facebook for my events, but in the area where young people are challenged, some of the people in my theatre group have mental illness, and they sometimes don't understand that Facebook works on logarithms, and so if not enough people respond to their posts, they think that there's something wrong with them, but they don't realize it's to do with logarithms. But so it can be confusing for some people. And in the area of, do you also have a policy on, I suppose, environment and all those sort of things? I think that's a concern for people, the greens and things like that.
Yes, we do have a policy on environment. We believe we should be good stewards of our environment, and we should be protecting the environment, but not at the expense of human flourishing. So, for example, I was recently at the Prospectors and Miners AGM, and some of those members are very concerned that they're going to be locked out of larger and larger areas of land, particularly in the Golden Triangle. And for decades, all their life, they've prospected in those areas.
Yeah, it's great that you're concerned about all those areas. However, unfortunately we have to end now. But I wish you all the best in your work and politics and your care for the community, the Australian community. Wishing you goodbye and God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Spirit of Life. Tune in next week. Goodbye and God bless you.